What is going on, everybody? It's Jay Coffee Talk. Thanks for tuning into my channel. As always, I greatly appreciate it. Take a quick moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. And more importantly, join the discussion. For those who see the title of this video, if you're not a wrestling fan, you don't have to, click off this video because we're not necessarily talking about pro wrestling. We're talking about an event that shocked everyone, myself included. I am a wrestling fan. I don't really keep up on it anymore nowadays, but grew up a wrestling fan, and at the time that this happened, the summer of 2007, I remember it well. I still was following wrestling, and Chris Benoit was one of the best wrestlers ever. Anyone who knew him spoke about him, as far as what he was like personally, as a great person, a nice guy, a family man. But he killed his son, wife, and then killed himself. A double murder suicide that just never, it was always hard for me to accept, and for many other people. I'm sure now what's going on is Vice just dropped a video. You can find it on YouTube. I believe it was on TV as well, and it was called Benoit Part 1, The Dark Side of the Ring. It's a two-part little documentary about Chris Benoit and about the murders and everything. And like I said, this just was always hard for me to accept. It just didn't seem right, as well for many other people that knew Chris Benoit, fans, everyone. It was like, how could this have happened? How could he have done this? A lot of people, I'm sure, remember seeing Chris Benoit. As I said, many people described him as a family man. When he won the title at WrestleMania, he was celebrating in the ring with his family. And it's just a crazy situation. When it originally happened, WWE Wrestling held a tribute show honoring Chris Benoit, as they do with many other fallen wrestlers when they pass away. For those who are not wrestling fans, maybe people look at wrestling and go, oh, it's corny, it's fake, or whatever. It's a rough lifestyle. It's like a rock star lifestyle. They're on the road all the time, and so many wrestlers die young, overdoses, suicides, all kinds of stuff. Now Vice did this documentary. As I said, we'll all be waiting for part 2, but I'm sure it got a lot of people's back thinking about this tragedy, myself included, which is why I'm bringing you guys this video. And part 1, they just kind of went over Chris Benoit. A lot of it was about his friendship with another wrestler, Eddie Guerrero, who's an outstanding wrestler as well. They wrestled early on in their careers together, and other wrestlers as well, like Chris Jericho. And quick side note for any hip hop fans: West Side Gun, one of the most popular rappers in the rap game right now, he named his album that he dropped a couple of years ago called Supreme Blientele, also known as the Chris Benoit or Briss Benoit album. And the video to the song Lotto is a wrestling match early in their careers between Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit. But anyways, getting back to this, the part 1 covered a lot of his friendship with Eddie Guerrero. And something interesting that came up in there, about their friendship, was that Chris Benoit didn't, he was kind of agnostic, or didn't really believe in anything. And Eddie Guerrero gave him a Bible and started talking to him about faith and things like that. And Chris Benoit was known to always carry that Bible around with him after that. They talked about that in part 1 of this documentary. Now, at the murder scene, at the crime scene, there were Bibles placed next to the bodies of his wife and son, and one next to his own body as well. So, that was just kind of something that I thought of during this part 1 of this documentary. Something else that was kind of crazy during this documentary was seeing his older son, who he had from a previous marriage, who did not live with him at the time that this happened. And seeing him talk about all this, and about his wife or stepmother, and how they Chris's wife, his stepmother, the son David, and how they were really close and everything like that. And he didn't consider her a stepmother, but he didn't live with them at the time that this happened. But it was just kind of crazy how strong the family resemblance was. This kid looked just like his father. It was just kind of eerie to see him talking about this, just looking just like Chris Benoit. I don't know if anyone else felt like that. But as I said, it was hard for me to accept, as well as many others. People just didn't want to believe that Chris would do this and couldn't understand why. Later on, after examining Chris Benoit's brain, there was signs of CTE, from many concussions that they felt could have played a part in this. Back when it happened, everyone wanted to blame steroids, it seemed, as far as the media went. But I mean, roid rage, I don't want to say is a myth. It is a real thing. It can mess with your emotions, but not something on this level, as where, the allegations or what did happen here, was over the course of a weekend. It wasn't like just a, lose your cool, flip out, go into a roid rage and hurt someone. No, he, killed his wife by, the crime scene. After investigation, it seems that he put his knee into his wife's back, had her bound up at her feet and hands, and, strangled her with a cord, and sedated his son with Xanax, and, strangled him or smothered or strangled him while he was sleeping, so it wasn't a rage type situation. But, there was a lot of conspiracy theories floating around back then that I just kind of wanted to bring up and talk about now. Like I said, with this docu-series dropping part 1, I'm sure a lot of people are thinking about this all over again. Now, one of the theories was that Chris Benoit's doctor, Dr. Phil Aston, who, was later sentenced to 10 years, was picked up by the feds. And, they saw that he was giving Chris Benoit a ridiculous amount of steroids. He was linked to other pro wrestlers as well. We're talking about steroids, painkillers, Xanax, all different kinds of things, that in the wrestling world and in other sports as well, athletes, are drugs that are abused. So one of the theories that people, were thinking was that Chris Benoit and this doctor, they were linked into some kind of steroid / painkiller ring, and that there were some unsavory characters involved who wanted to take out Chris Benoit. Now that, the heat was on the doctor and the doctor was arrested by the feds, that they wanted to kind of go around and, eliminate anyone who, could talk if they ended up being arrested or interrogated. So there was a lot of theories floating around about, maybe that possibly being what happened. Now, another theory that a lot of people took and run with, and I'm sure if you go look it up, you can find all kinds of articles and videos and things that people made about this, was another wrestler from Chris Benoit's not real early wrestling days, but earlier, 7, 8 years, 9 years earlier than this, 10 years earlier than this, Kevin Sullivan, who is a wrestler in WCW, who is also part of the booking committee, and I believe he still works for WWE. Nancy, Chris's wife, who he killed, was her previous husband. And what happened was, back during the WCW days, there was a storyline where Chris Benoit stole Nancy from Kevin Sullivan, which this actually ended up happening in real life, Now, where the conspiracy theory comes in is not just a jealous ex-husband getting revenge, but it goes a little bit of a step further. And this was kind of something that was covered part 1 in this docu-series, was that Kevin Sullivan in WCW and before WCW's wrestling gimmick was an evil, satanic, I guess you could say, character known as the Taskmaster, who had a stable of villains or, evil, almost like monster like, wrestlers. And, Nancy was a part of the Taskmaster's, stable or whatever, as she was, dating him and then later married to him before WCW and smaller wrestling, independent wrestling, promotions. She was a part of it, and then later in WCW as well. And she got in on the gimmick where she dressed like she was possessed as well. And if you saw part one of this, they covered this. Now later, as I said, storylines in WCW, Chris Benoit steals her from Kevin Sullivan, and they end up having these brutal matches where they were fighting over her and everything. But this actually happened in real life, where she left Kevin Sullivan and got with Chris Benoit. So there's all these conspiracy theories floating around that, they really were into, dark occult like things, based on the gimmicks that they, portrayed in wrestling, that they were really into this in real life. And, they were coming basically back to collect and pay Chris Benoit and Nancy back and, stage this crime scene to look like Chris Benoit did it, when in fact it was them getting evil revenge in some kind of satanic occult ritual or something like that. Now, I mean, that's obviously a stretch. I'm not inclined to believe that at all, and I'm not saying that I believe any of these conspiracy theories. I'm just saying I definitely looked into all this stuff and thought about all this, just because it just didn't seem right, that it just didn't make sense that Chris Benoit would do this, but other wrestlers, when this happened, as I said, this happened basically over a weekend, they believe, and then it was discovered Monday what happened. Other wrestlers that were friends with Chris Benoit were covering for him over the weekend, as he had missed a couple of smaller event house show dates, and then Sunday was a major pay-per-view, so they were originally covering for him Chavo Guerrero and I believe Chris Jericho. They were covering for him, but then later, they got weird texts and calls from him where he was saying that his family was sick and they had food poisoning and stuff like that. And then, they ended up going to the higher ups in WWE, because they came to them and said, how did he miss this major pay-per-view event where, he was supposed to win a title from someone, and they had to put someone else in his spot and everything like that. And, that's how they ended up, discovering what happened. Now, based on the way they say Chris Benoit was acting, they said they talked to him. He was acting strange. He sent strange messages. He was saying everyone was sick. There's people out there that still believe that, Chris Benoit, was maybe being held captive and forced to say these things on the phone or something like that, but, based on what they say, it really does seem that what is said to have happened, but there's one more strange thing about this that I gotta bring up when we're talking about conspiracies and stuff like this, that was always quite strange to me, and I just never quite bought the answer that we did get. As I said, Chris Benoit missed a wrestling event that was on pay-per-view, and someone had to fill his spot and everything like that. Well, 10 hours before, the crime scene was discovered and people had learned that, that everyone was killed, or, that he had committed suicide and his other family members were killed, someone got on Wikipedia and put an entry on Chris Benoit's Wikipedia page saying that he missed the pay-per-view event because his wife, personal issues stemming from the death of his wife 10 hours before she was discovered dead. Now, this has always blew my mind. In the end, when the police investigated it, they said, we found who it was. It came from an IP address in Stamford, Connecticut, which is strange because that's where WWE is located. And they said they seized the person's computer, they interrogated them, and there's, you know, it was just a coincidence that the person was speculating on what happened because Chris Benoit missed the pay-per-view event. But this has always not sat with me too well. I've never quite understood how such a crazy coincidence could happen in, you know, in this situation where it was a double homicide / suicide, that it was just a coincidence. But in the end, that's what the police said. And I don't know, you guys can get in the comments about that as well as everything else, but that just was always very strange and bizarre to me. That's what, you know, it was just a coincidence. You know, this as I said, it was just hard for people to accept to begin with. But then you throw in this crazy Wikipedia conspiracy. I don't know, 10 hours before the discovery of what happened. It's pretty amazing that such a coincidence could just happen, you know. But in the end, you know, it goes down in the history books as this is what happened. And it seems that this is what happened, you know, that Chris Benoit snapped and lost it and had some kind of mental problems that no one knew about, as everyone did describe him as a great guy and everything, but people did also describe him as being very quiet and, you know, very just standoffish with people. You know, as I said, he did have friends that were very close to him, and they did speak during this Vice series documentary, as well as other stuff that's out there. But it was just very, very crazy for all this to happen. But, you know, they said that maybe he was bottling a lot of stuff up. He was quiet. He kept to himself. And, you know, there was rumors that his son had a condition called Fragile X syndrome, which is, you know, said to be an intellectual or like developmental disability, where sometimes the children's have like a deformed head and they're maybe smaller. And as I said, there's intellectual disabilities where they're just developed differently when it comes to their, you know, intellectual, how they are, you know. But, you know, in the end, there was no medical records to support this, but Chris Jericho did say that when he heard this was not something that Chris Benoit ever said, you know, because he, you know, kept to himself. But he said that knowing, you know, Chris Benoit's son, that it did fit the mold as far as the description for what this, you know, Fragile X syndrome looked like. And when they discovered the body of his son had needle marks, and they determined that they had been giving the kid growth hormones to maybe help him develop. But there was rumors that there was domestic issues over the son's condition. You know, I'm just speculating here. We don't know, but there's just been talk of that maybe they fought over this. And, you know, Chris Benoit was known as being a wrestler to be the kind of guy that, you know, had a small man complex and just thought that he was never big enough. And maybe his son possibly having this disability, because as I said, after, you know, the passing of everyone, there was no medical documents to support this, but there was rumors to where his close friends, as I said, Chris Jericho, another wrestler who was a close friend of his, said that, you know, when he heard it, it made sense and seemed that, you know, the kid did have this. But I don't know, you know, maybe this bothered Chris Benoit and he wanted to give him the growth hormone to try to treat it, and the wife didn't want to, or I don't know. I'm just speculating here, but it's just a crazy situation, you know, that this ended up happening. You know, anytime someone kills their family, you know, especially, you know, in a situation like this one, it just never makes any sense, you know. So I just wanted to make this video and go over these different theories and this information. As I said, this Vice video kind of brought this all back up, you know, has everyone, I'm sure, thinking about this again. So get in the comments and let me know your thoughts about all the different information I went over. Let me know if it's been hard for you to accept this as well. You know, I mean, I've pretty much come to deal with it now. But I just want to go over all of this with you guys. So thanks for watching. Make sure to join the discussion in the comments, as that's what this channel is all about. I thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell. I'll catch you guys on the next video. It's Jay Coffee Talk signing out. Peace.